Hello everyone, welcome to another interesting and informative session of The Analyst brought to you by Vajiram and Ravi. In today's session, we will discuss 9 important articles as featured in the Hindu and Indian Express for your comprehensive understanding of the current affairs. Keep this in mind that the first 3 articles are very much relevant for the upcoming mains examination, and we also provide you with the opportunity to attempt answer writing on the current issues. The topics are as follows. In the first topic, we are going to learn about the prevalent issue of witch hunting in our country. Yes, you heard it right. The serious issue still prevails in 21st century. In the second topic, we are going to understand that what is the urgent need for a policy to regulate stray dogs in the country. In the third topic, we are going to learn about the election process which takes place in Rajya Sabha and why our constitutional makers did not adopt it for proportional representation method. Followed by the fourth topic, where we are going to learn what is a financial bill and how it differs from the provisions of money bill. And finally, in the fifth topic, we are going to look towards the biggest tiger reserves in our country, as a recent tiger reserve has been notified in the state of Chhattisgarh. Followed by the prelims snippets, which are very helpful for the prelims examination as well, so stay tuned. The editorial raises the grave issue of witch hunting, which is still prevalent in our country in 21st century, and also examines the various laws and acts which has been promulgated to deal with this heinous issue. This issue of witch hunting forms an important component of your GS1 paper under the larger theme of social issues and your GS2 paper under the theme of issues related to women. Now, how many of you have actually heard about Biru Bala Rabha? Doesn't ring a bell? Okay. Have you guys heard about Harry Potter and Dumbledore? Sounds quite familiar, right? Well, these associations of men commencing magical power in our country, they are often termed as wizards or even demigods. But the same connotation turns in bad light when it is associated with women, as they are branded as witches. These women who are facing various kind of mental traumas and mental disorders, their terming of witches leading to their ostracization from the society and the discrimination which they faces, this actually points out as a failure of us as a society and also the abdication of law. Just for your information, Biru Bala Rabha is a Padma Shri awardee and she fought against this practice of witch hunting throughout her life. Now, on one hand, we are talking about that how the women are going to be the engine of growth for our country in the future, right? We are talking about how we should put impetus on their education, how we need to increase their female labor force participation rate. At the same time, on the other hand, just at the extreme spectrum, there lies this issue of witch hunting. Is this even a serious societal concern? The answer is yes. Just look at the number of states which are accounted for more than 20 murders or culpable homicides which has been caused for the witchcraft. Staggering numbers such as 436 in Andhra Pradesh, 424 in Jharkhand and 396 cases in the state of Odisha. And also look at the staggering share which this witch hunting forms as of the total cases of violence which are perpetrated against the woman. Now, is this issue of witch hunting is only prevalent in the underdeveloped nation, such as for example India, Papua New Guinea or Sub-Saharan African countries? No, the answer is no. Even in the developed countries such as of Europe, they also had their fair share of committing such heinous crimes against women. You can just Google about the kind of Salem and Suffolk trials. Now, remember that these issues which are being perpetrated against the women at such a large scale, what are several factors which propel such issue? The answer is that is these issues like only limited to the underdeveloped nations? Absolutely not, as we have seen. Even the editorial today, it talks about that how these issues are still prevalent in USA, in Europe, and obviously the 5th largest economy of the world in our country. What are the factors which propel such issue? The root of these issues lies in the patriarchy and misogyny which still prevails in our society. So you guys might have heard about the abolition of sati which took place in 1829. And you guys can recall that how the legalization of widow remarriage in 1856 is considered as a logical step to that. There is a reason for it. Because if these women were not being dragged to the cremation pyre of their husband, they were actually being branded as witches. They were ostracized from the family and society. Their heads were being shaven, their faces were painted black, and they were facing all these issues because of the reason that they were being termed as responsible for the untimely death of their spouse. Obviously, the economic motive to grab the property by the relatives was also involved in this. And all this issue has been highlighted very vividly in a book called as Istri Purush Tulna, which has been written by Tarabai Shinde, also mentioned in your modern NCERTs. So you can use this in your answers as well when you're talking about the issue of women empowerment. The second major issue is that the existence of social stigma and such obsolete practices, especially among the various tribes in our country, which has ultimately passed from one generation to another. Now, this ultimately leads to what? The inconceivable cruelty which actually awaits the women who are branded as such witches. Now, what is the reason behind this patriarchy, this misogyny, and these obsolete tribal practices which are still prevalent today? A major reason for that is the prevailing illiteracy. So the modern education which we have been lucky to get access to, it has not penetrated that much in the rural hinterlands and in the tribal belts of our country, which is also highlighted by the State Commission for the Women in Odisha report of 2021. According to which between 2010 to 2019, the amount of cases which were registered for witch hunting, there were 27% cases where the women were branded as witch hunted because they were held responsible for the health issues among children. 43% because of the health issues prevailing in the villagers. 24% were held responsible for the misfortune or land grabbing which took in place. And not surprisingly, 5% were actually held for the crop failure which took place. So obviously the illiteracy where these people has limited horizons of knowledge, it ultimately leads to the passing of the patriarchy and misogynal practices from one generation to another. This was also highlighted actually by a book called as Caste Census, which was written by B.R. Ambedkar in the year of 1916, where he highlighted that how such witch hunting practices is prevalent, especially among the weaker socio-economic strata, where there are still certain castes and certain tribes which sustain these obsolete practices to maintain their hierarchy position in the society. So obviously how it will be decided that you have higher caste or lower caste? Obviously the position of higher caste is decided that how much lowest position you can actually denote to your woman in the house, right? The second reason is obviously the acquisition of land and property, right? So just imagine yourself as a woman who has just lost her spouse, and you are either with or without children. So obviously the relative of your spouse will try to do what? Try to just grab your property. So there are economical motives which are involved, right? The third is to gain socio-economic and political advances. Remember that this practice of superstition, it actually provides a cushion to the politicians, where when you go to the politician and you ask that why I do not have got the land or the roads, the electricity, why I am sitting unemployed, that person will tell you, these political leaders, these religious leaders at local level, that there is something which is wrong in your family because of which you are facing these misfortunes. And what can be wrong in your family? Obviously, it is easiest to pass the blame to the women of your house, right? Who are not financially independent. The fourth reason is that in many of the cases, it is also observed that there were sexual advances by the high caste people, and when that was not accomplished, these women were actually branded as witches. Remember that the easiest way to kill a person is to kill his or her reputation. The rumors propagated long enough turns into beliefs of the people, ultimately leading to the ostracization and discrimination which is being faced by these women. The next is the blurring line between the protector and the perpetrator. So imagine yourself when you are facing such a social trauma, such a mental trauma after the passing of your spouse, whom you will be more emotionally inclined to at this turbulent stage. Obviously to the female relative of yours. But these female relatives itself becomes the perpetrator of such rumors, obviously because of the various economic motives which are involved. Now, as per the National Crime Record Bureau report of 2018, it actually enlisted down several reasons which are responsible for this heinous practice. First is obviously the lack of education, as we have talked about. The second is the insidious use of regressive custom. And for what purpose? To oust these women from valuable land, right? Then obviously the monetary motive is involved. The personal grudges can be there. Then there are certain failures on the behalf of administration as well. The first is what? The failure of administrative machinery to keep a check on this practice of witch hunting, or the loopholes and the lack of accessibility of these women to go and ask for the protection of the police, because many a times at the local level this police administration actually colludes with these perpetrators itself, because they do not want to face the backlash which can be in the form of the society. Thus, this prevalent issue has actually led to a significant disastrous impact on the mental health of the woman. What is the impact of women because of such heinous issues which is still prevalent in our society? The first is obviously the physical violence and the threat to the life which they face. The second is the name calling and abuses and the social ostracization, which ultimately leads to what? Their deterioration of their mental health. So now the leading cause of death among the girls, especially aged 15 to 19, is not childbirth, rather it is suicide. Because these women are twice as likely in comparison to us as a man to develop major depression, PTSDs and anxiety disorders. At the same time, they face a lot of barriers to access these mental health services. So obviously all of this, does it lead to the violation of Article 21 and 19? Absolutely. It violates the women's right to dignified life. It violates their freedom of speech and expression, their freedom of movement across the country, because their freedom of residence as well, because many of the times they are actually thrown out of the villages. They have to live in the periphery of villages, right? Many of the times, because they are coming from this poor socioeconomic strata, they do not have that much of high level of education. So where they will go, what job they will get, ultimately leading to the vicious cycle of poverty which is passed from one generation to another generation. Also remember that these acts are more the act of symbolism, where such acts against women actually terrorizes the whole women community altogether. Thus, are there any steps which the government has taken to advance the gender equality, which is also a Sustainable Development Goal 2030 for us? The government has taken several steps. First and foremost, the United Nations Human Rights Council, it adopted the resolution on elimination of harmful practices related to acquisition of witchcraft and ritual attacks in the year of 2021. Thus, it has provided the data for at least 60 countries. Remember that only 2 South Asian countries are listed in this particular list of data of the 60 countries, and obviously one of the countries India and the other is our neighbor Nepal. Now, in light of this, also remember that there exists no central legislation which curb the practice of witch hunting. A major reason for that is obviously the absence of Uniform Civil Code, which is directed under the Article 44 of the Constitution. So if you get a question on Uniform Civil Code, in the favor of that, you can use these practices of witch hunting which is taking place. For example, there was an Assam Witch Hunting Bill 2015 which was put in the parliament, but it has not been passed yet. Then there are certain provisions in the Indian Penal Code. For example, the culpable homicide under the section 323, which is penalized and punished. So under that, most of the time these cases are dealt. The next is that there are various laws which has been framed by the state government, such as for example the state of Bihar, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Rajasthan, Odisha as well as Assam. Also, with the date of their enactment, you can see that how recent these cases are, right? Obviously, there is a lack of social engineering among the people because we are not very much aware about it. right? The major issues which lies with these laws are the less awareness which we have, such as this, which are very important. So even in these laws, there exist certain issues. The first is obviously the ambiguity in the law. For example, let's take the law which has been enacted by Odisha. What it does, it penalizes witch hunting. But at the same time, it does not penalizes the witchcraft. At the same time, there is no kind of standard definition what separates witch hunting from witchcraft. The second is the low rate of prosecution and the conviction against these laws which has been framed because of the collusion of the local authorities at the ground level. Then there is low punitive penalties. For example, if you are caught for this practicing this witchcraft in the state of Rajasthan, you will be charged a hefty penalty of 1,000 rupees. The fourth is the less impetus on social engineering, as we were discussing in this particular case. So for example, how many times you have actually heard the women member of parliaments raising this grave issue at the parliament level in the front of the whole nation? So what can be the ideal way forward? The first is obviously the promotion of scientific temper, which is also a fundamental duty under Article 51A. In this direction, the value-based education as envisaged under the National Education Policy 2020 is very important. The second is to create a strong legislative framework where the legal remedies shall be provided to the people who has been victim of this witch hunting. At the same time, we need to provide these victims what? A psychological support. At the same time, we need to take immediate step for their economic empowerment as well. The fourth is to improve the access to healthcare, specifically in the rural areas, right? So for that, the Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, the Ayushman Bharat, all of this can be implemented. Then there need to be a social awareness program such as a kind of a Sachet portal which has been created by various state governments. Also certain bureaucrats were there who took such steps at the ground level to increase the awareness among such heinous issues in the local communities. So on the basis of this discussion, try to solve this probable mains question. If possible, comment your answer in the comment box and we move forward to the next news. The article highlights the issue of stray dog menace prevailing in the country in the light of a recent judgment which was passed by the Supreme Court in the Animal Welfare Board of India versus the Best case. This issue of stray dog forms an important component of your GS4 paper under the theme of ethical case study because a question can be asked putting you in the place of an officer and asking you that what will be your response to this stray dog menace. But before we dwell into that, first let's talk about the evolutionist history which these dogs shared with us humans, which has been based upon the principle of companionship. One might recall the story of the god of death Yam who accompanied the Pandavas to their path to heaven. And in the form of what? In the form of a dog. Many of the historians, they actually assert that this forms the earliest documentation of the domestication of dogs. And this story has been listed where? In your Swargarohana Parv, which is the 18th chapter or 18th book of Mahabharata, also the shortest one. Now, from the infographic as well, we can see the evolutionist history which these dogs shared with us. Right? For example, all the modern day dogs are considered as the descendants of the grey wolf, and their domestication started around 30,000 years ago. And the oldest fossils which we find which are associated with the domestication of dogs is of around 14,000 years ago. Even when you guys are reading about the Indus Valley civilization, you can hear or learn about the burial of the dogs along with the humans at several sites such as, for example, Ropar. Now, there has been a recent phenomena which has surfaced in the news called as stray dog menace. The question here arises is that is this even a serious issue up to the level of considering it for our UPSC level discussion? The answer is absolutely yes. The reason being because our country, India, holds the dubious distinction of being the world's dog bites and rabies capital. And the number speaks for itself. because India accounts for 36% of the global death due to rabies. At the same time, 65% of the death due to rabies in the region of Southeast Asia is accounted where in our country. Now just look at the staggering number of the dog bites, which ranges in lakhs in several states in the span of a year. At the same time, also, you guys might be coming across various articles and headlines which are talking about such attacks by the dogs, specifically on the small children, which actually has led to the creation of dog phobia among the larger citizen. Now, what are the causes or the factors which has actually led to the increasing number of dog bites in the society? First is obviously the increasing population of theirs. So just look at the data here, the dog to human ratio. So we almost have one dog to even lesser than 100 humans in our country at many places. So with this, we can estimate that they have a population of around 1.5 to 4 crores. Now, what are the reasons for such increasing population? Majorly, there are two. First is obviously that these dogs, they breed prolifically. And this supply of dog always extend the demand by the pet lovers. So this surplus is actually left on the street as a stray dog. The second major reason is obviously the poor sterilization drive which has been taken by the local authorities to just curb the increasing population of these stray dogs. The second major reason is the fascination of pedigree dogs or for the foreign breed dogs. So when you are just caressing at your home your German Shepherd or for example your Husky, you are basically leaving out a native species of the dog on the street. The third is the development of the territorial instincts. So remember when we were talking about their evolutionist history. So because of that, these dogs very early, they start developing a kind of a loyalist instinct towards a person or towards a territory. Why? Because they start thinking in this way that, okay, I am getting food from this particular region or person, this is my home. Many a times there has been large congregation of dogs at such food feeding spaces, ultimately leading to the pack of dogs fighting for this limited supply of food, leading to the animal-human conflict. The another reason is the lack of health infrastructure and mechanism. So obviously, who is the most vulnerable to such dog attacks? The poor people. They are the most vulnerable section. Also, they had the least amount of access to the easy health care. At the same time, it also reflects at the other side of the issue, and that is the poor vaccination drive to just curtail these dog bites, which actually spread what? A viral disease called as rabies. Then there is issue of the limitation of acts. So for example, there are several acts which has been enacted to control this issue of stray dogs, such as Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act 1960, the Animal Birth Control Rules of 2001 or the Animal Birth Control Rules of 2022. However, these act itself has certain loopholes. For example, first and foremost, they say that culling or euthanization of dogs can only take place in two cases. One, that dog has been declared mentally ill or that dog has declared mortally wounded. Only in these two cases. The second is that these act itself provides that the charge of the Resident Welfare Association of the large complexes, they will create such feeding spaces for the dogs. The same feeding spaces which are becoming the bone of contestation between the dogs, ultimately causing the animal-human conflict. Then there is obviously the issue of poor waste management. So many of the time, this poor solid waste management actually leads to the littering of waste in a particular area where these packs of dogs congregate to get some food, right? Ultimately leading to what? Ultimately leading to the aggressive battles which take place, and in which ultimately it causes what? The increasing human-dogs conflict. The second aspect of this is obviously we can say that there is the lack of food and living spaces for these stray dogs. So there is a lack of alternative as well. Then there is a grave ethical issue, and that is animal rights and human rights. So there are animal right activists. They say that okay, these dogs also has certain rights, right? These dogs also has right to life. Now remember that the right of the animal is not recognized under the fundamental right under your Article 21 of the Constitution. It only recognizes what? The human right. At the same time, just imagine yourself as a parent of a 4-year children who has been dragged on the street by these stray dogs. Will you be given any kind of concern to this animal right? Absolutely not. And that has what led to the conflict between these animal rights activists and human rights activists as well. So home right should be given primacy, the right of animal or the right of man, right? Or they shall be equally balanced. So in this direction, the government has taken certain steps. The first and foremost was the animal birth control rules of 2023. What government did? Let's have a look on that. The government said that first of all, it notified this rule and said that there will be a strong program for sterilization and immunization of these stray dogs, and who will carry out them? The responsibility lies on local bodies. The second is that rule provides certain guidelines for dealing with this human stray conflict without the relocation of dogs. And what it suggests? It says first of all to provision of designated feeding spots where the movement of children and senior citizens are very less. The second is ensuring that no littering take place at such feeding location to avoid the conflicts. The third, it says that the civic body will claim this sterilization drive. So it put the impetus of sterilization and vaccination on these local authorities, right, who are responsible for these drives. And they will also ensure the adequate facilities at each animal birth control centers as well. Now, along with that, it says that there shall be a guideline to resolve the complaints related to these dog bites and rabid dogs as well, right? And these reports shall be submitted on monthly and annual basis to the local authorities. So these are the steps which has been taken by the government. What can be the way forward which you can take as a future bureaucrat? First is obviously the strengthening the legal framework. So there is an immediate need for the identification of such wild stray dogs, and their culling shall be done on the basis of zero tolerance policy as followed by USA. Then at the same time, there shall be a strong legal framework to provide vaccination and sterilization drive on the large scale. For that purpose, we also need to make sure that we follow the feelings of compassion toward these people who cannot speak, these animals who cannot speak. And this was the directive of the Supreme Court recently in the case, where it said that the Article 51A provides for the compassion even to all living beings, including the animals, even if it is not a fundamental right provided to them. Thus, what we can do, we can actually collaborate with the non-governmental organizations who are working for them, the animal welfare bodies, such as we can take the example of Maharashtra, who has actually collaborated with Blue Cross Society and providing for this vaccination and sterilization drives. Then there is need to be a sensitization drive among the masses, right? Also for the larger scale level of adoption of the native dog species. So for example, the immunity of native dogs are much better than the foreign breeds. So this shall be actually propagated to the large public. At the same time, there shall be promotion of a responsible pet ownership. And these local communities, what they can do? First and foremost, they shall organize regular drives for the citizen to spread awareness, and the regular surveys to maintain the robust record of these stray dogs. On the basis of this, try to solve this particular question, which can actually appear in a larger case study for your ethics examination. If possible, you can also provide some steps which you will be taking as a bureaucrat if you are given the charge of this issue. We move forward to the next news. The Election Commission of India has notified elections to the 12 vacant Rajya Sabha seats which are about to be held on the September 3, 2024. This process of election in Rajya Sabha forms an important component of your GS2 paper under the larger theme of parliamentary functions. First, let's try to understand the composition of parliament, which consists of 3 integral chambers. One is your president. The second is your Council of State, also called as Rajya Sabha. The third is your House of People, which is also called as Lok Sabha. Remember that president is not member of any of the houses, but still remains an integral part of the parliament for a reason that any bill which is passed by these houses, it cannot become an act unless and until the president give its assent, right? Then these Hindi names, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, were adopted for this Council of States and House of People in which year? In the year of 1954, where the Council of State represents the states and union territories and the Lok Sabha represents the people of India as a whole. When we have understood this, first let's try to understand that why the elections of Rajya Sabha is important, because even though it is not the direct representative of the people, it has certain very important functions to play. First of them is that no bill except for the money bill is going to become a law without being passed by the Rajya Sabha. Rajya Sabha also maintains the federal equilibrium by protecting the interest of state versus center. Rajya Sabha has certain judicial powers, as for example in the removal of Supreme Court or High Court judge, Attorney General, CAG, Chief Election Commissioner. Any charges against the Vice President can be levelled only by whom? By the Rajya Sabha. Then there are certain executive power as well, right? Certain exclusive powers which only Rajya Sabha has. What? Under Article 249, only Rajya Sabha can declare a states list subject as a subject of national importance, so that now the parliament can make law as well. The second is Article 312. So only Rajya Sabha can create a new All India services which is common to both center and states. Then in case of Lok Sabha dissolution, the national emergency can be passed by the Rajya Sabha. Right? So these are certain very important powers which Rajya Sabha has, and on the basis of this, try to solve this prelims question of 2020. We move forward to the next, that is the composition of Rajya Sabha, which is very important for you to understand the election process which is going to take place in Rajya Sabha. The first is that Rajya Sabha, as per the Constitution's Article 80 and the Schedule 4 of the Constitution, it has 250 seats. 238 of them are the representative of states and union territories, and 12 of them are actually nominated by the president. So these elected members in the Rajya Sabha are indirectly elected by the members of state legislative assemblies. Does all the member of state legislative assembly actually vote in the Rajya Sabha election? No, only the elected members vote there. Right? 12 of them are actually being nominated. Nominated for what? For 4 things. If they have knowledge or practical experience in the field of art, science, literature or social service. Currently, in Rajya Sabha, there are 245 members. 12 of them are nominated. Out of remaining 233, 229 are representative of states and 4 are representative of union territories. Along with this information, there is a question which I am asking. The question is that in our Rajya Sabha, the Council of States, we have a process for the nomination by the president. Now, in the case of American Senate, is there a process of such nomination by the president as well? Just comment your answer in the comment box. The next important thing which you need to understand is that the term of a Rajya Sabha member is 6 years, and every 2 years, 33% of the members retire. Thus, every 2 years, there is a poll to conduct the election for the falling vacant seat of 33%. Now, when we have understood this, let's try to understand that how the election is going to take place for states first, and then we will understand about the union territories as well. So in the state, the members are indirectly elected by the elected member of the state legislative assemblies. The members who are elected, only they are voting. Now this election is going to held in accordance with the system of proportional representation. Keep this term in your mind. The second is by the means of single transferable vote. These are 2 important keywords which many of the time people are actually confused about. So we are going to discuss them in detail. Another important thing is the allocation of seats is done on the basis of population. So let's try to understand this first. Let's say that there is Uttar Pradesh. Uttar Pradesh has much greater the population than the state of Goa and Tripura. So Goa and Tripura has got 1 seats each in the Rajya Sabha, while Uttar Pradesh has got 31 seats. This is in contrast to the United States House of Senate, where each state, so USA has how many states? 50. Each state has got 2 members or 2 representatives in the House of Senate. Thus, the House of Senate has membership of 100 members. Now remember that to get qualified to nominate yourself for Rajya Sabha seat, there shall be at least 10 members of the State Assembly or the 10% of the party strength in the House of State Legislative Assembly, which shall say that okay, we are going to put this person for the candidature. Now let's try to understand these two terms one by one. First, to understand the proportional representation, we need to understand what do we mean by single transferable voting. So we are going to take a hypothetical state named TO, and TO has 100 seats, right? Out of these 100 seats, there are only two parties which exist for our convenience, Party A and Party B. Now, there is a Rajya Sabha election which is going to take place for how many seats? For 3 seats. Now, this Party A has won 70 seats in the recent state election. The Party B has won only 30 seats in the recent election. Now, if there are, let's say, 5 candidates who are fighting among these seats, so these 100 members, 70 from Party A and 30 from Party B, they are going to get a ballot paper on which the name of these 5 candidates will be written. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Now, how many votes shall these one candidate shall actually secure to become the Rajya Sabha member? So for that, we have got a formula here, right? What is the formula? The formula is the number of votes which can be polled. How many number of votes can be polled in this case? 100. 70 from Party A, 30 from Party B. Then the total number of seats which are available. How many seats we are fighting for? 3. Plus 1 in that. So that becomes what? 4. Thus 25 plus 1. So total that will come as 26. And each vote of MLA in this case is considered as a value of 100. Thus 2600 votes will be required for each candidate here to secure the seat to Rajya Sabha. Now let's say that this particular party has 70 seats, right? Now it is going to, each candidate of each member of the party is going to vote in the preference of the candidature, right? So let's say there is a very good UPSC student, then there is an average UPSC student, and then there is a bad UPSC student. So when I am going to vote, being the member of State Legislative Assembly, I am going to mark my preference 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 in this particular way. So it is obvious that if the required number of seats were what? 26 out of 100. The Party A has got 70 seats. So it will be able to secure at least 2 seats. That is 52 votes. Now to also, get the third member from their party, they would have required additional 26 votes, which they do not have. So the second party, which has got 30 seats, that will also be able to secure 1 seat in Rajya Sabha. What we can learn from here is that because these members who are getting elected to Rajya Sabha, they are being elected as a proportion to the strength of party in the Legislative Assembly. This is exactly what we mean by proportional representation. Now, what do we mean by transferable vote? So that I understood that, okay, if I am going to vote, my vote is only going to one particular person as a single vote, right? But I am voting in preferences. So what happens that if out of these 70 members from a particular party, 50 of them voted for one candidate itself, and the candidate required how many votes to win? Only 26. So what will happen with the extra 24 votes? They will be transferred to the second preference. And this is exactly what we mean by single transferable vote. So we have understood single transferable voting. We have understood the proportional representation as well, right? Now, we'll try to understand that, see, if this proportional representation was taking place, so it is obvious that the parties can calculate that, okay, we have got 70 members, we will get 2 seats, these party will get 1 seat. So till 1998, no elections actually used to take place in Rajya Sabha because the parties already used to understand by the calculation that how many seats they are going to win in the Rajya Sabha election. But in 1998, something happened. What happened? In Maharashtra Legislative Assembly, the case of cross voting came, where the member from the Party A, instead of voting for these first 2 or 3 preferences, they voted for the member of other party. So because of that, in 2003, an amendment was brought to the Representation of People Act of 1951, which said that from now onwards, the election is going to be held through open ballot. So now these parties, party A and party B, they will be appointing their agents. And when I am going to vote as a member of the state party, I will need to show my ballot that, see, I have voted for the candidate from my party itself. This was actually upheld by the Supreme Court in Kuldeep Nair versus Union of India 2006, where Supreme Court said that if secrecy is becoming the source of corruption, then transparency has the power to remove it. You can also quote this in your ethics answer as well. Then a next question arises that, okay, so anti-defection law will be applicable in the case of Rajya Sabha election, because what if the party told me that you need to vote for this good student, but I am like, no, I am going to vote for this bad student only. So in this case, I am defecting the authority of the party. So will the whip regulation will be applicable on me? I will be considered as defected from the party lines? No. Supreme Court held that even the Election Commission of India in 2017 and the Supreme Court in Kuldeep Nair case had held that this anti-defection law will not be applicable in the case of elections on Rajya Sabha. Also, in the Salesh Manubhai case of 2018, the Supreme Court held that the none of the above option will not be applicable in the Rajya Sabha election. So we are left with what? We are left with the elections in union territories. So currently, in union territories, the elections are held indirectly elected again by the member of electoral college, which is especially constituted for this purpose of Rajya Sabha election. How many union territories have representation in Rajya Sabha? Only 3 out of 9 union territories. Which are they? They are Delhi, Puducherry, and recently added Jammu and Kashmir. Now, the question arises that if this proportional representation system seems to offer certain benefits, why it was not adopted for the Lok Sabha elections as well? Because it also contains certain demerits. The first was obviously the low literacy level which prevailed during the time of our independence. Because just try to imagine that if the person is going to actually vote and 100 of the people in a particular district voted for one person, but the vote was required was only 44 or 45. So the rest of the votes are being transferred to the second preference. It is a very complex system for the normal people to understand. This, and at the time of the independence, what was our literacy level? It was around 11 to 12%. So that is why, because people will not be able to understand it, the constitution maker kept it aside. Another reason was that it can actually bring instability in the government because it can actually propel a lot of party culture. So a lot of parties can come. The third was that it is highly expensive to actually promulgate at the local level and at such a large scale level, right? In the largest democracy of the world. The third was that this system, it give more preference to the party system rather than the voters. It also promotes minority thinking and the group interest. And it actually eliminates the people's connect. Because how many of you actually remember the member of Rajya Sabha, especially from your constituency? You will be much more inclined towards the member of Lok Sabha, right? Because you have voted for him. You know him personally. And then there is obviously no scope for by-elections as it is for the first past the post system, and that is why it was adopted for our Lok Sabha elections. On the basis of this, try to solve this very interesting question. If possible, comment your answer in the comment box and we move forward to the next news. The Financial Bill 2024 was passed by Lok Sabha with amendments relaxing the proposal for the long-term capital gains tax on the real estate. Here we are going to put our impetus to understand what is a financial bill and try to solve a prelims question on that, which forms an important component of your GS2 paper as well under the theme of functioning of parliament. Let's first try to understand what is a financial bill. So as per the definition in the constitution is a bill which deals with the fiscal matter of the government, such as revenue of the government, the expenditure of the government. And as per the constitution, this financial bill is basically a technical term which comprises of money bill under your article 110 of the constitution, your financial bill 1 under article 117 clause 1, and the financial bill kind of 2 which is article 117 clause 2. Thus, can we say that all the money bills are financial bills? Absolutely yes. But does all financial bills are money bills? The answer is no. Now let's try to understand the differences which exist between this money bill, financial bill kind 1 and financial bill kind 2. First of all, what is the purpose of this money bill? The money bill basically regulates the matter which are specifically enlisted under Article 110, such as, for example, imposition or abolition of any taxes. Now, does this include the imposition of fines as well? Please answer. The second is that, okay, if I am just, taking any funds out from the Consolidated Fund of India, so that will be considered as a matter of money bill under Article 110. So what is the difference with financial bill kind 1? The answer is that a financial bill kind 1, it deals with the matter under Article 110, that is money bill, but it also involves the provision of general legislation. So to understand that, we will take the example of this reform which is being promulgated for the capital gains tax itself. So now capital gains tax obviously deals with the revenue of the government, the revenue which will be deposited in the Consolidated Fund of India. So that means it deals with the matter of Article 110. But at the same time, this law also has provision for several other general legislations. What are general legislation? So the government is saying that, okay, there were old taxpayers. Now these old taxpayers, they can actually shift to the new regime as well. So because there are matter of general legislation involved as well, that is being considered as a financial bill kind 1. Then what is financial bill kind 2? It basically deals with the expenditure which is taken from Consolidated Fund of India, but it does not involve any matter listed under the Article 110 of the Constitution. The second is that who can introduce a money bill? The money bill can be introduced only by a minister, only in Lok Sabha, only with the prior recommendation of President. The financial bill kind 1, just try to copy the money bill here, because money bill is the ideal of financial bill kind 1. So financial bill says I will also only be introduced by a minister, I will also be only introduced in Lok Sabha, and I will also be only introduced with the prior recommendation of President. But the financial bill 2 does not have any such provision. It is normally introduced by minister, and it has nowhere written that no other member can introduce such financial bill kind 2 as well. The third is that, okay, what is the role of Rajya Sabha here, right? So Rajya Sabha can return when the bill is given to Rajya Sabha. It is passed only in Lok Sabha. When it is given to Rajya Sabha, the Rajya Sabha can return the bill with or without recommendation, and that's it. The recommendations are accepted, not accepted. Rajya Sabha even does not send the bill for the maximum period of 14 days. Anything like that, the bill will be considered as passed. Thus, in the case of money bill, the authority of Rajya Sabha is completely bypassed. Now, what was happening that the financial bill kind 1 was trying to be like money bill because it was his idol. But it tried to copy him in these two aspects. But after that, the people got to realize that the financial bill kind 1 is actually a duplicate one. So now all the special things which we are associating with financial bill kind 1, it will actually lapse. So now the financial bill even can be rejected or amended by the Rajya Sabha, just like the financial bill 2 as well. The next is, what is the role of speaker? So in the case of money bill, the speaker endorses that bill as a money bill, right? But in the case of financial bill 1 and 2, speaker again has no role because the duplication power of financial bill kind 1 has now lapsed. Then what is the majority required? So remember that even to pass a money bill, the majority which is required in Lok Sabha is a simple majority, because if the government wants money in the immediate basis, it can just avail that. And the same is in the case of financial bill of both kinds. The next is, what is the role of president? So in the case of money bill, the president can give his assent, can say, okay, very good. The second is withhold his assent. So even in the case of money bill, can president withhold his assent? Absolutely. Means he rejects it. He says, no, I'm not going to pass it. But he cannot return the bill for the consideration of the Lok Sabha. The reason being that it was passed on the recommendation of him at the first place. The second is that in the case, now again, all the special powers of financial bill kind 1 has elapsed. So the president can give the assent, withhold the assent, or even can return the bill for reconsideration. Now, in the case of money bill, as we have discussed, Rajya Sabha has no role to play. The maximum it can do is that it can discuss the bill for 14 days and then the bill has to go back again to the Lok Sabha. So obviously that there is no scope for deadlock to occur. But in the case of financial bill, Rajya Sabha has equal power in the kind of both the financial bills 1 and 2. So now maybe the chances are that Rajya Sabha can reject the financial bill. So a deadlock can occur, and thus there can be a provision of joint sitting to resolve this deadlock, which can be summoned by whom, which can be summoned by President. On the basis of this discussion, just try to solve this prelims question which appeared in 2023, and please comment your answer that if you got it right or not. We move forward to the next news. With the tiger population plunging in the recent years, the Chhattisgarh government has notified a new tiger reserve which is going to be the third largest in our country, and thus it forms an important component of your prelims paper under the larger theme of general issues on biodiversity. So, in the year of 2014, the Chhattisgarh has around 46 tigers. However, by the year of 2022, this number actually plummeted back to 17. Now we are going to have a little bit of reading about the Panthera tigris, or this tiger. This tiger, which is actually enlisted as an endangered species on the IUCN's list. Now we have a good news that in the recent years the numbers has actually significantly increased. So if we look at the report which was released in 2023, which actually provides us with the estimation of tiger population till the year of 2022, the population has actually reached to 3,682. Now, which are the states with the highest tiger number? So just note this down, the chronology can be asked. The Madhya Pradesh has the highest, followed by Karnataka. The third is Uttarakhand. Fourth is Maharashtra, and fifth is Tamil Nadu. At the same time, there are certain states with lowest tiger numbers as well. But before that, we are going to see the reserves which has the highest population. So the reserve with the highest population of tiger is Jim Corbett, that is in Uttarakhand. Then there is Bandipur in Karnataka, the Nagarhole, which is also in Karnataka, the Bandhavgarh, the very famous in Madhya Pradesh, and the fifth spot goes to the Dudhwa Tiger Reserve, which is in the state of Uttar Pradesh. Now there are certain states which actually fared, such as the states with the highest population which we have discussed, but there were certain states where the tiger population actually plummeted, states specifically being Mizoram, Nagaland, Jharkhand, Arunachal Pradesh, and as we have seen, the state of Chhattisgarh as well. Keep this in mind that there were actually certain tiger reserves, the reserves which are specifically created to protect the tiger, which has 0 tigers in the numbers. So just look at these important tiger reserves which are actually failing, the tiger reserves. That is your Dampa in Mizoram, Kamlang in Arunachal Pradesh, Kaval in the state of Telangana, Satkoshia in Odisha, and Sahyadri Tiger Reserve in the state of Maharashtra. Now, when we have talked about this particular tiger reserves which are not actually showing good care or good protection of tigers, the Chhattisgarh state being one of them, let's talk a little bit about the tiger reserves. The tiger reserves are actually notified by the state governments, as it has done by the Chhattisgarh government, on the recommendation of whom? On the recommendation of National Tiger Conservation Authority. Now, currently, the number of tiger reserves in our country are 55. If you will just take a screenshot of this particular map which has been given here, it provides you with the 53 tiger reserves in our country. The 54th tiger reserve was notified in the month of August last year. That was Dholpur Tiger Reserve in the state of Rajasthan. And now this new tiger reserve which is being opened, the new tiger reserve which is in the state of Chhattisgarh, that is Guru Ghasidas Tamor Pingla Tiger Reserve. It is going to be the 55th tiger reserve in our country. Before this, the state of Chhattisgarh had 3 other tiger reserves. They were Indravati, Udanti Sita Nadi, and Achanak Mar tiger reserves as well. Now, as we have learned repeatedly that this is going to be the 3rd largest tiger reserve in our country. The question arises that which is the first largest then? The first and the largest tiger reserve in our country with the largest area under critical tiger habitat, which was also a prelims 2020 question, is Nagarjuna Sagar Sri Salam. The second largest tiger reserve is in the state of Assam. This is a hint which has been given to you. Just try to search which is the second largest tiger reserve in our country. And we move forward to the next segment. where we are going to cover some important news which can actually help you to excel in your prelims examination as well by helping you to eliminate some important statements. The first news talks about the Rashtriya Vigyan Puraskar, which has been in the news. Why in the news? Because the Chandrayaan 3 team, which was actually responsible for landing of the spacecraft on the south pole of the moon on 23rd of August 2023, thus making our country the first country to achieve this feat, has been awarded with the Vigyan Team Award. Now, what is this Rashtriya Vigyan Puraskar? Let's try to understand that. So, last year, the government, it disbanded all the existing science-related awards and created a new set of National Science Awards in 2023. Which is coordinated by the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research under your Ministry of Science and Technology. Now, there are 4 categories of award which has been devised. The first is your Vigyan Ratna, which is given for lifetime achievement. The second is Vigyan Shri, which is for the scientist of all ages. The third is Vigyan Yuva, which is for scientists under age of 45 years like you and me. We have that child dream to become a scientist. And the Vigyan team for collaborative research work, as it has been awarded to the Chandrayaan 3 team as well. Now, the award ceremony is going to be held on the National Space Day. Now, just comment in your answers in the comment box that when the National Space Day is going to take place. We move to a very interesting concept called as pyrocumulonimbus clouds. The pyrocumulonimbus clouds has been in the news because of the raging wildfire which has taken place in the states of USA and Canada, which actually gave birth to these pyrocumulonimbus clouds. So what happens is that, let's say if there is a large scale of fire activity which is taking place, right? Let's say volcanic eruption has taken place or a large scale wildfire of forest. So very immediately the region will become hot, and because of this the air will rise immediately, as you can see here. Now, this air contains of what? Water vapor, dust, various kind of chemicals and all of that. So, it will find, these smoke plumes will find a very dark cloud here as well. Now, see, normally what happens that you need to have a kind of a very large rate of temperature inversion, right? So, you go up in the altitude and there is a decline of around 6.5 degrees Celsius in the temperature per rise of 1 kilometer. But now here there is a very sharp temperature differences because very hot at the ground level and very cold just immediately above. So the condensation of the cloud will take place, leading to the formation of cloud. First, these clouds are actually formed as cumulus clouds, and over a time they perform to this pyrocumulonimbus clouds. Now remember that because this condensation of cloud has taken place at a very low level, but at the same time there is not enough water vapor present. So there is more lightning actually which take place, or just the collapse of the cloud altogether. So that can either lead to the event of flash flood, or these lightnings, it actually further exacerbate the issue of the forest fire which is taking place in the Canada region. So keep this concept of pyrocumulonimbus cloud in your mind. We move forward to the next issue, and that is osteoporosis. What is osteoporosis? To understand that, first understand that the hormone estrogen, it plays a crucial role in the growth and formation of the newborn. Now, when the women, they face this menopause, there is a decreasing function of the ovaries, which ultimately lead to what? The depletion of estrogen. This depression of estrogen ultimately leads to what? A low bone density, or the bones becoming weak and brittle, the issue which is called as osteoporosis. Now, is this just a layman issue? Absolutely not, because in India we have more than 10 million plus cases. Now, the news today in the science section of Hindu talks about a new hormone, that is CCN3 hormone. So the scientists, they are cultivating this hormone because they have found out that this hormone can actually increase the bone mass, especially in the postpartum lactating mothers. With this, we have reached to the last news of the day, which talks about Operation Dudhi. Operation Dudhi, which was conducted by Assam Rifles in the year of 1993. And what was the reason for that? Because there were just 15 soldiers of Assam Rifles, which were actually guarding the area of the borders in the region of Jammu and Kashmir, when they came across a band of militants of around 70 to 80. And these 15 soldiers, they just fought with all the ammunition which they had at their disposal, and they eventually safeguarded our country's security by killing those militants. This is still considered as one of the most successful kind of mission which has been conducted on Indian soil. Remember that these Assam Rifle is the oldest paramilitary force which we have, and it was formed in the year of 1835 during the British rule itself. With this, we have reached to the end of our discussion today. Do not forget to attempt the questions at the end of the video and test your knowledge. We will meet in a very interesting discussion very soon. Till then, all the very best for your preparation, and thank you.